Welcome to Functional Philosophy, the show in which I, Charles II, explain and apply Ayn Rand's philosophy, Objectivism. If you'd like to ask me a question on Objectivism or its application, just go to charles2.com/contact. And my last name is spelled T as in Tango, E as in Echo, and W as in Whiskey. In episode 32, talking about how to think about the universe, you suggested the existence of an ether filling otherwise empty space. You glossed over this as a given without much explanation. Since the existence of an ether is not common knowledge, I assume that you believe there is some metaphysical necessity for it. Could you please clarify this? For what it's worth, I understand that nothing does not exist. Nothing is only the absence of something. It is only in reference to something that nothing has any meaning. The same can be said about empty space. Empty space does not exist. It is only the space between existents. It is only in reference to other objects in space that one can refer to empty space. But I don't see this as necessitating a plenum. It seems to me to be a false dichotomy to claim that because empty space does not exist, then there is no empty space between anything. I'd like to hear your arguments for the existence of an ether or the universe as a plenum. Well, I don't have any argument. All I have is what is given in perception, which is that existence exists, and the corollary of that, which is that non-existence does not. Now, you say you understand that nothing does not exist, but that seems to be precisely what you don't understand. You say that it's a mistake to think that because empty space does not exist, then there is no empty space between anything. But that is precisely what we mean when we say that empty space does not exist. You believe that nothing does exist, but it exists as nothing, which is a contradiction. The premise of Objectivism is the non-existence of nothing. There is no nothing. You think we can say that gaps in the universe exist, but they exist as nothing, and so we're not saying that nothing is something. But that is what we would be saying, and it is what you are saying. To say that there are gaps in the universe, comprising nothing but empty space, is to imply that there is a place you can go that is void. But the truth is, there is no void. There is no nothing. It's not that nothing exists but as nothing. It's that there is no nothing. Well, then you might ask, why do we even have this term? Well, because when we say nothing, we don't mean what you mean by it. If I buy a new house, and I go into one of the rooms, and I say, there's nothing in here, what do I mean? Well, what I don't mean is that there is literally a void in this room, that there is empty space here. What I mean is, from the perspective of my purpose, which is, let's say, to fill this room with a desk and shelves in order to turn it into a study, which will ultimately redound to my physical survival, there is a range of objects, a very wide range of objects, which do not occupy this room. There are no elephants in here. There are no Syrian refugees. There is nothing that can't be easily displaced by my desk and shelves. However, there is something in that room. There is air and whatever else is in there. So I don't mean there's literally nothing in there. I mean nothing from the perspective of my purpose, nothing relevant to what I plan to do with this room. So what you said is true. It is only in reference to something that nothing has any meaning. So when I say there's nothing in that room, it's only by reference to this wide range of things that I'm saying aren't in this room that nothing has any meaning. When I say nothing, that's really just shorthand for none of this wide range of things. Not that there is literally just absence in that room. However, you take this to mean that we can have two things and a gap in between them, and that's okay because we're still only talking about nothing in reference to these two other things. But that is not what that principle implies. The way you talk about this is revealing. You say it is only in reference to other objects in space that one can refer to empty space. But objects aren't in space. Space is an abstraction from objects with physical extension. There's not space out there and then things in space. And then they can separate and there can be a gap in between them. No, there are only things. Space is really the same thing as nothing. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's very similar. So I could say the same thing about that room. Oh, there's a lot of space in here. Again, I mean exactly the same thing as if I were to say there's nothing in here. What I mean is, I'm abstracting away the particular things that exist with extension here. Not that there is literally space without any content. Space is an abstraction. There is no such thing as space. Space is not a thing that exists. There is no space. There are things, and when we talk about space, we mean the area in which things exist, and which can be replaced by other things. So the space in my room is not absent. It's not this metaphysical thing called space, this independently existing dimension or receptacle. It's, oh, there's a bunch of things in here, air, namely, the entities that make up air, and we can replace those with other entities. So we're abstracting away all of these entities that exist in the area of my room and discussing what kind of things could replace those entities. You see, your conception of reference to other objects is metaphysical, not epistemological. But that's a mistake. Space, nothingness, those are abstractions that have meaning only by reference to things that actually exist. We're not saying that metaphysically we can have void so long as we can say that it's 3 miles west of downtown. Next question. I'm just wondering what the nature of the rights of children is from the perspective of objectivism, and what the moral relationship between a parent and a child is like. I haven't seen this issue properly addressed. That's not to say it hasn't been. Certainly I could have missed it. But I am curious about when rights and responsibility begin. It seems Rand herself concluded children do not have full rights, but in any case, I'm curious about the obligation to care for your child, if any exists. Yes, one exists. Now, when rights begin is really the question of abortion, which I'm not going to go into right now. I did answer a question on that a while back. But whatever one's view on that, rights begin at some point, and they certainly begin in some limited way before adulthood. Children have the right to be sustained by their parents, to be provided food and shelter, some form of education, the basic requirements of survival that a not fully developed rational being cannot yet procure for himself. And then when the child reaches the age of majority and has developed the full capacity for reason, he is responsible for himself, and the obligations of his parents to him cease. Now, I want to stress the responsibility of a parent to provide his child with an education, to get away from the concrete boundedness some people may have here. No, it is not true that a parent only has the responsibility to provide food and shelter, which is probably what a libertarian would believe. A good libertarian, really, because a real libertarian would say that a parent has no responsibility to his child. Child's in the world, fend for himself. So that would be doing pretty good for a libertarian, but my standards are not that low. So I want to stress that a parent has an obligation to provide his child with an education. At least he has the obligation to equip his child to read and write and do arithmetic. These are demonstrably requirements of survival in the modern world. I don't think the state can mandate all kinds of details, but I do consider it child abuse, warranting state intervention, if a parent simply feeds and clothes his kid, houses him, but never teaches him anything or sends him to any school. Now you might say, well, rights come from the fact that a creature is rational, and therefore is a value to you as a free, rational organism. And in violating his rights, you're violating your own, because he will turn against you. But this doesn't apply to children. A child doesn't necessarily benefit you, and they're small and weak, so maybe you could just not worry about the threat they pose if you treat them like animals. But what you are failing to take into account here is that since rights are based on the value of other people to you, then it would be a contradiction to believe in rights for adults, but not for children, because the thing is, adults have to come from somewhere, and the place they come from is children. You know, there's a connection here between that tired, old objection to objectivism that says that Ayn Rand says that organisms are built such that they automatically seek their own survival, at least non-volitional ones, but really their ultimate purpose is procreation. Well, guess what? For an animal to exist, to pursue its own survival, it had to come from somewhere, and the place it came from was its parents. And so you can talk about how spiders will eat their mate once they have children, and say, oh, see, they're not built for survival. But you are dropping context. They are built for survival, in the context of what was required for them to exist in the first place. If that spider wasn't the kind of creature who would let itself be eaten after it procreated, then it would not have existed in the first place. And something broadly similar applies here. You can say they aren't rational, so they shouldn't have rights, but these are the things that are going to develop into rational adults. And you have to take that into account when you're considering rights. You can't just say not rational yet, no rights. I mean, you may as well say people have no rights when they're asleep if you're going to take that tack. This person is asleep. He's not engaged in a process of reason right now, so I can kill him. No. Next question. My question relates to the death penalty and whether or not it should exist in a free society. I recently read an article in the New York Times which reported that the Pope had declared the death penalty to be inadmissible in all cases. This got me thinking. Is it moral for the state to execute a violent criminal? I am currently reading OPAR for the first time and have just completed Chapter 8, Virtue, in which Leonard Peikoff, among other things, describes the objectivist position on the concept of justice. Although the objectivist position on the death penalty is not stated explicitly, it is my moral estimate that Ayn Rand's vigorous advocacy of the good and condemnation of the evil implies a need for having the death penalty available for the most egregious instances of rights violations, mass murderers / serial killers, etc. Is this your understanding of the objectivist position? And if so, what are the objective facts which give rise to this idea? And finally, what do you think are the ideas underlying those people who say, We can't resort to the level of the murderers or terrorists. We must be better than them and lead by example. Surely this just sanctions evil. All those people who say, don't sink to their level, in a context in which you would obviously not be sinking to their level, you would be retaliating, are concrete bound. They don't think about context. I think William Buckley Jr. had a good line on this when talking about comparisons between the CIA and KGB. He said equating them morally is the same as equating somebody who pushes an old woman out of the path of an oncoming bus with somebody who just maliciously pushes an old woman over, on the grounds that these people both push old women around. Obviously, these people are dropping context. Context is important. You can't just say, oh, this guy killed somebody, you killed somebody, so it's the same. No. If this person killed me unprovoked, for no reason, he is a murderer. If somebody attempts to kill me and I kill him first, I am not a murderer. I have killed, I am a killer, but I have killed in self-defense. And there is no moral equivalence. So it's just concrete boundedness. It's disintegrated thinking. Now you say, what is the objectivist position on this? There is no objectivist position on this. In two ways. First of all, this is a concrete political issue, and objectivism is a philosophy. But second, Ayn Rand specifically said about this and gun rights that there was no objectivist position. In fact, she didn't have a particular position on what the law should be. Now, you are correct. She did believe, and I believe, that morally there is no problem with the state executing a murderer. Her concern was an epistemic one. We can make mistakes, and a mistake of this kind is irreversible. I mean, every mistake is irreversible in the sense that you can't go back and undo it, but in this case, there is no possibility of making it up to this person in any way. There is no possibility of anything for this person because you are ending him. So Ayn Rand had no position on this. Objectivism, as a philosophy, has no position on this. And I, like Ayn Rand, have no position on this. I'm not saying there's no right answer. There must be a right answer to this, but it's a specific political question. Perhaps the right answer is that it's optional. I don't know, but morally there is no problem with the state executing murderers. Whether we want the state to be able to make mistakes regarding something so consequential is another question. If you'd like to keep up with everything I do, just go to charles2.com. If you'd like to enable me to do more, just go to patreon.com/charles2 and become a supporter. Thanks for listening.